From healing to high performance, this is the Warriors Ascent podcast. This episode is brought to you by Torch AI, unlocking human potential.
Well, all right. Welcome to the Warriors Ascent podcast, season 5, with your hosts, Mike and Matt. All right. So I'll say the initial episode for this season, we talked about interviewing, having as guests board members, partners, supporters, all of that. And we also spoke, I'll say conceptually about, hey, why is it that these people are in our orbit? I'll say philosophical and ideological alignment, what is it about our organization and these individuals that are aligned, shared values, shared, mission, ethos, virtues, you name it. We talked about empowerment, ownership, a variety of things. And then I also mentioned that, hey, one of our board members who just happens to also be a client, that we were going to interview him and really kind of get his, I'll say, why and wherefore. It's my podcast co-host, Matt Hastings.
Yeah.
Hey. So, we've heard Matt's story. We'll hear it again. But I think, for this episode, we're gonna go deeper. We're gonna dive deeper, man. and we're going to really kind of hear from him. What is it about Warriors Ascent now as a board member, as somebody who's very involved, so much so that, hey man, we're doing a podcast together to kind of spread the word. What is it about Warriors Ascent and our mission that really resonates with him? Where does that alignment stem from? So Matt, please take it away. I've got a few questions that I can tee up, but in the meantime, just kind of take it from there. Set the stage for us.
Well, I'll go back that I was a helicopter pilot in the Army, and I got lucky to take 3 tours to Iraq towards the end, and finally hung up the suit in Fort Riley in 2016. And then that's when things start getting weird, because the transition was a little rougher than I expected it to be, because just kind of lost that purpose. Pretty sure is what it was, to the point where I was letting it get to me pretty bad, and I was isolating, and things weren't going great with my marriage, and everything was kind of seeming to be off. It was getting real rocky when I realized I should make an attempt to come find some help. And I was talking to one of my favorite therapists, Dr. Goff, who we've had on the show before.
That's right, Brianna.
And she's a big supporter of Warriors Ascent. She sent me, the information to contact Warriors Ascent. And I thought, I guess I'm going to look into this thing myself. And I looked up the website, read about it, and thought, well, I'd go to this thing, but there's no way that they're going to have anything, or that, there's no way I'm going to get in anytime soon. And so I made the phone call, I made the application, and within, I think maybe that day, I got a phone call back from Tammy, our outreach coordinator, and she was already out. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know I was going to have to answer this quick to all this. But she was really coaching me and coming and said that they had one in 3 days. And I just happened to get really lucky. Now that I've been involved a little bit, I realize how much luck that was, that there was a cohort in 3 days, and there was space for me to get there. And it was one of those things where I was happy that could be the case, and I was also terrified that could be the case, because that's that ownership. I got to go now.
That's right.
And I said to her, listen, I'm sure there's somebody worse than me that needs it, And she said, no, it's sitting here reserved for you. And but Tammy keeps telling me that, that I tried to pass it off to somebody who needed it more than me. And I think that in one way it was me defending myself for not having to go, but in another way it just is kind of how it is, and how I got used to living my life is like, you live in service of the others around you as well. We're on this team that's more than just a soccer team, we give of ourselves and put team members in front of us all the time, and it's just selfless service. It's part of who we are. But there's no doubt that I was trying to hide a little bit from going to the thing. But eventually the day came that, I had to pay the piper and I had to go. So I did. I had, siblings in all corners of the United States. So I geared up to go to maybe one of their places in case I didn't make it to Kansas City. I knew I was leaving where I was, but I might not be going to Kansas City for this. But I made the drive, and I was on the phone with a friend guiding me the whole way, and I got in there and went to the retreat. And so it was pretty. I really needed to get there, and again, I'm super grateful that there was one within a short time frame of when I really kind of needed it. Right when I was cycled down into the dark part, of how I was, of my emotions at the time.
No, I appreciate your candor, man. I remember, when you came in, I remember that distinctly. You're like, "Hey, Brianna Goff sent me. I'm Matt." I'm like, I've been expecting you. You've got quite the pedigree, my friend. So you've got such a great story, a storied career. And I know in previous episodes, we really kind of got insight into, some of the things that you've done and et cetera, et cetera. Let's I'm not going to say flip the script, but now being a board member, being even more involved with the organization on the back end. Let's talk about that. Let's spend the rest of our time in this episode getting your perspective, kind of seeing, I'll say, behind the scenes in terms of, hey, how the organization is run. I'll say some of the challenges, some of the needs. Again, the outcomes and others, aside from yourself, right. That you've seen the organization able to affect, that I think, not to speak for you, but you can take pride in knowing totally. Hey man, I had a hand in that. We've helped even many more people since you graduated as well. So speak to us about that, the perspective of a board member or somebody that now, having graduated from the program, benefited the program, is now paying it forward and giving back by being instrumental in keeping the organization on target.
As you know, and I'll claim it again, that going to that, at the time I went, saved my life without a doubt. I didn't have any certain plan, but things weren't going well, and it changed everything for me. So I knew that this was legitimate. I came in with some doubts. I'd tried different therapy. I'd tried different modalities. I'd tried sticking stem cells in my brain. I tried all sorts of things, and I was willing to try anything, And when I got there and found out all they're asking for was yoga, meditation, journaling, and some things that just weren't all that odd, it just, after the outcomes that I saw, not only from me that I felt, but what I witnessed amongst the group I was with, and then how that helped them going on as we stayed in contact with each other. I mean, I knew I had to get involved at a different level. I got asked that year to be the keynote speaker at our celebration dinner, and so I was able to do that, and that kept me involved. But I knew that I could bring something more to the table, and I really wanted to. I'm retired, I have time on my hands. I'm not far away, so it seemed like a great fit. And so now, it took some time to make it to the board and get voted in on the board. Now I've been probably a board member. This is for just basically a year now, just almost a year. And it's been a 2-year since I graduated. And in that time, I've had an opportunity, to try to fundraise, go through fundraising events that we do every year. Multiple times I've been through those now. And just the efforts that a small group of people, there's only 3 people that work this organization all the time to host, up to 15, 18 people on our events. So I also kind of try to help out with that small group when I can, just because it's a lion's share of work that they do to host these things. And to get together the funding it takes. There's no funding that's coming from, federal sources. We're not supplemented by some giant benefit. I mean, this is scrapping all the time to get the money to get these veterans and first responders and people who serve their nation an opportunity to come here at no cost to them. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of networking. It takes, partners across this community that care. And we're always out there trying to find who those people are. And there's a lot of different organizations that are out attempting to do similar things. So you're competing for dollars, even though you're trying to solve the same problem.
That's true. That's true. So along those lines, I would say, what, from your perspective, both as somebody who's benefited from the program, but then also on the backside as a board member, supporter, I'll say value proposition. What is it about our organization? I mean, I'll say he'll compare us to others, but what is it that you feel Warriors Ascent does particularly well?
Well, and it's time and time again. I saw it happen in my time that I attended, was taking a group of people, and I'll say guys because we stick to gender, all male, all female groups for good reason. And to watch somebody or multiple people in your group go from just utter despair, and you can see them lost in their eyes, to at the end of 4.5 days, probably a couple days in, really, you see the change. And you see them grab some hope, and you see them taking these changes and the tools that were taught at Warriors Ascent and utilizing these tools and starting to see them. It's the ownership, the empowerment that we talked about before is that's what I think is the most important thing. And when we bring somebody who wants to get involved, we bring them to a graduation because almost everybody gives a most powerful testimonial of their time there. And I mean, they're all just like unbelievable at those days. So I think that's important for people to see. But I keep watching that same dynamic in the group and other people supporting each other. Like it goes right back to that thing where I'm going to sacrifice myself for somebody, but if I see somebody else doing well, it's going to make me do well. Like watching their success brings up my success. And so that group dynamic, I think, is incredibly important.
Well, I'd say one of the elements, call it the secret sauce, aside from, the multimodal, right? So cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based therapy, emotion-focused therapy. We've mentioned that before from the article in the Journal of Psychotherapy Integration. But the multimodal group therapeutic, treatment program, I think is the game changer, the powerful aspect. And we've talked about this before, so I won't go too far down this road.
I mean,
but
it really is.
It's the group piece, that this notion that you're not alone in your suffering. I think a lot of people suffer in silence. We've talked about that. That validation and vindication, right? When people share openly and they're vulnerable and they're like, all right, I'm going to tell everybody how I'm feeling, what I'm dealing with. That's both cathartic for them. They're able to kind of express and articulate their emotions, which for, I'll say, our demographic, psychographic is somewhat difficult.
It's
People are like, I don't talk about that. And in that same article I've mentioned, they talk about the primary coping mechanism being avoidance. You feel those emotions, you avoid those emotions.
Yep.
And we provide an opportunity wherein we're like, no, guys, you got to process that stuff. You can't keep tamping it down and compartmenting it. And that the validation comes in when you realize that I am not the only one that feels this way. So that's super important as well.
It's true, and I know
about that.
And other people have said it too, and that's helps me. When I got there, I was so disappointed and angry with myself for having to be at a point where I needed to show up to a 5-day, retreat.
We've heard that from multiple people. Like, how did I let it get to this? And
how
it's
did
just
this
like,
happen to me?
But that's kind of par for the course, man.
Yeah, and when you get there and you find out almost everybody's thinking that same thing, and then again, there's something to that. And then somebody starts saying, it's like, wow, those are almost the same words I'd have used. Or you explained that in a way I couldn't explain it, and that helped me. That happens a lot in a group therapy scenario.
See, the paradox, I think, too, is people will ask, how did I let it get to this? But I would submit to you, now we just ran our 65th cohort, 2 weeks ago. So we've seen it 65 times. And invariably, it takes people to hit almost that rock bottom,
right,
for them to finally say, I need to take action. Because short of that, I think people are like, nope, I'm keeping it together. No, I'm holding it together. And not that we wish that on anybody or say that's necessary, a necessary, prerequisite for you to come to Warriors Ascent is, you've got to reach rock bottom. I'm not saying that. However, there are many people that is what it took for them to finally say, oh my God, I've got to do something, whether it's them or a spouse or a loved one or a coworker or somebody to say, dude, you need to do something. So paradoxically, sometimes it's almost a necessity, to be a catalyst for somebody to come to our program and get the help that they need. So,
all right. I mean, there's something to be said about the power of that happening amongst others in the tribe. Again, there's that feeling that you're being put back together with like-minded people with similar situations, and there's just this kind of a security in that. And then we're doing some oddball things, but you're with others, and we're all kind of teasing about it, and it just makes it consumable. It makes it doable, and you watch outcomes, and it's better. That was the kind of thing that really hit it home for me. Was just that was just what it was.
It's the tribe. It's there's so much to it. There's the curricular, which is the again, I'll call it the metacognitive, CBT, got it. Then we do self-care, right? That's important too.
Well, all that was important, yeah.
Right, but I think it's the tribe, being around like-minded people with that spirit of service. With I'll say similar backgrounds. They may be different, but the spirit of it was similar. So you're veteran, first responder, whatever it might be. But you're serving a purpose, a mission, a calling higher than yourself. I think there's the similarity.
It really is.
And then the other thing too is you've got a lot of people, they've left the service, whether the military or law enforcement or the fire department, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's a gradual progression, retirement, in your case, my case. And then for others, it's kind of stripped from them, whether through injury or whatever.
Right.
And I'd submit to you that even if it were, I'm not going to say a soft landing, but a natural progression, okay, now it's time for you to retire. Okay. When your identity, as we say, is inextricably linked to your position, your duty position or your role or what you were, and now that's stricken from you, that can be hard and unsettling.
Very unsettling, for sure.
So you're no longer CW4 instructor pilot with 5,000 hours. You're Matt Hastings, and for some people, it's just like, man, I used to be somebody. I used to be an important guy. I used to check ride people, and I decided whether they flew or not, and I'm being somewhat lighthearted and cavalier about that, but you're an important guy, still are an important guy, but in a different way, Yeah,
and I think it happens to a lot of people. And I don't know, some deal with it by getting a like job and jumping right in, doing the same thing. I guess one of the things as an aviator, if I was going to go make real claims and my disabilities, I was going to make a decision on what kind of career path I was going to have afterward. And I made the choice to talk about PTSD, and that pretty much ended aviation for me. So, but I think that's the right decision anyway.
Hey man, that's, again, PMCS of you, taking care of yourself, man. No, so challenges and potential solutions, again, from, the 30,000, the 30,000 foot level, right? For, I'll say, Warriors Ascent as an organization, or even just contending with PTSD and anxiety, I'll say societally, what is it that you see that are challenges and potential solutions?
I think the biggest challenge that keeps haunting me is it's not the outreach to people, because we do that effectively. What we don't get is people that want to sign up. And that's, to me, is a stigma. It shows me there's still a stigma out there, whether it's, there's a lot of active law enforcement officers, EMS. They don't want to raise their hand and say they're struggling with something, because it's probably going to be looked at poorly on their job. And that is just the way it is. The same thing, again, I can't be a pilot and have PTSD at the same time. That's just something you can't do. And so, losing my train of thought there, but
no, but I mean, the challenge is, I think that you're, the line of logic you were going down is, the challenge is people might need the help, but they choose not to avail themselves of it because they're perceived as a liability for saying they need the help, even though I think we've made great strides as a society to say, hey, if you need help, go get it. I know for us, in keeping with the challenge and potential solution would be to look at it less in terms of, I had one therapist, he talked about, and I'm trying to remember the way it escapes me, but, oh my Lord, I'm completely spacing on the way he articulated. He said it's less about recovery, it's, and more about discovery. So I know recovery kind of seems like not pejorative, but it's like, oh, recovery, you're a recovering alcoholic, you're recovering from this. Whereas if you look at our program and how it's structured, it's really about discovering you, how you're wired, how you function, the things that, the patterns of behavior. And that subtle mindset shift, I think, is powerful. So that even if somebody comes to us and it's just like, oh, are you in recovery? Or you need to, no, I want to learn about how I function, the whole, preventative maintenance checks and services. And I'll say this, I'll try to keep it brief. Again, 65 cohorts, I've seen the lights, go on. I can't tell you how many times. When we talk about system 1 and system 2 thinking, when we talk about, your patterns of thoughts and behaviors, and CBT, your thoughts drive your emotions and drive your actions, neuroplasticity, the notion that you can, in fact, rewire your brain and change the way you think and behave. And it's not preordained or immutable, and you can see it. People come in kind of thinking, I am who I am the way I am, that's the way I was made, that's the way I was born, and there's just nothing going to change that. And once they realize that, same thing, agency, no, you have a say in that, and it's going to take some work, but you can change the way you react and function. And once people realize that, then they, quote unquote, discover that I can make some changes for the better. So
I know one of the other things that got me was, that had me saying to myself, how could I get this far, was I was the provider, and I was the protector, not only of my family, but of my unit. And all of a sudden, I'm incapable of providing and protecting. And even at some points, I felt like my family had to be protected from myself when I would get too angry or upset with things. So, I mean, I still think that's out there today. I think there's a lot of people who have that stigma just towards themselves. Maybe they don't care if what their job sees, but it's what they think about themselves,
They feel they're a liability.
Yeah. And so those are the kind of guys and people that I want to reach and just say, the hardest thing I ever did was make that application and talk to Tammy and drive there that day. That was way harder than some of those landing zones and the dust and the, obstacles and people shooting at me. I'd take that any day over driving towards Kansas City to the Warriors Ascent that day, simply because I felt like I didn't have a skill set right then, that was keeping me operating right. So that's kind of what I found, is that wasn't true. And I found how to adjust the way I was thinking, through, system 1, system 2 stuff. So I don't know.
No, I think that is a good way. And I think maybe, like a parting shot and wrapping it up, using, hey, what are the challenges that we face organizationally, I'll say as a society, and then a potential solution. The challenge, if I'm hearing you correctly, is I'll say the impediment to action, right, is, well, hey, I don't want to be a liability. I don't want to come up on the radar as being in distress. I'm just going to suffer in silence and I'm going to muddle through. Because to admit that I have a problem is tantamount to saying, hey, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
And I think that's this, if I think adequately captured, what it is that you were, contending with personally, and that we've seen time and again, and maybe, and that's a challenge for this organization and getting people to come on board, people that we know need it. Cause that's the thing. I mean, we know that there are just so many people, and yet it just seems, all right, hey, we get people roster, then they back out, and you're like, is that for real? Or did you get cold feet? And you get a sense that in the nth hour, people are, they're backing out. But the solution, so what do you, again, same thing. If I'm hearing you correctly, I think a potential solution, it's this notion that, again, it's not recovery, it's discovery. It's discovering how your mind works and what changes you can make and need to make in order, dare I say, to not be a liability, but to hey man, show up as your best self and yeah, I mean,
and that's exactly right. I think it puts you on the right pathway. It gives you all the tools you need. It sets a good example for 4.5 days of what it could be if you take that agency, like you mentioned, and put the work in you need and switch over to make things more of a positive habit pattern rather than what you'd fallen into. Because that what you'd fallen into had gotten you where you are now. So like you don't have any huge risk in trying these other things. So I think that's what was so exciting about it for me, and I see it for other people, the way they leave there on this desire to approach this new life. And they're in this huge, giant excitement. I always warn them, don't get too crazy, like go out of here with that good heads up, but, face this real world as it's a real world and know that it can want to try to knock you right back down. But, just hang in there. And I think that every time I see another board member or bring a, community partner in to watch, and I see the faces of the new people that are watching this, and they want to be involved somehow. They have some reason they want to be involved, whether it was they have a family member who served, whether it's a grandparent, a parent, but they have some reason that they're, at this place in the first place. And when they watch this graduation and they watch what these people's testimonials are, it's hard not for them to get involved. So, we don't have a hard time showing people why it's important what we do. But still, it's a tough job to keep out there finding money. It's a worthy job. But we always look for help whenever we can get it, and so our big 4 events being, our celebration dinner and, in the summer, in the wintertime, we got a springtime event for clay shooting.
Yeah, sporting clays. We've got this Friends of Special Operations, golf, scramble. We've got, a variety of things. We've got Team Leadville, Tony Hoffman and crew.
Yep.
That do great things for us. So yeah, all sorts of fundraising. In the end, really, it's incumbent upon us to take those resources and produce great outcomes, which I think we do in spades, just, corroborated by,
it makes me
countless testimonials.
Happy and proud to have been chosen to be on the board and happy to do it every day. So it's always good to sit here with you and go through this too.
Sweet, man. As always, man. Boom, give it.
Thanks, brother.
Absolutely. All right. So next time we'll try to get another guest, another donor, supporter, partner. All right. Appreciate y'all.
Right, thanks
See you next time.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Warriors Ascent podcast. We're in Kansas City helping veterans and first responders with PTS. Check us out at warriorsascent.org.